The warm glow of sunset bathed Evelyn Carter's apartment in amber light as she stood before the full-length mirror, admiring the way her engagement ring sparkled. Just a few more weeks, and she would officially become Evelyn Blackwood. It sounded elegant, right? Meant to be. Adrian had been everything she ever wanted. Charming, compassionate, steady. He made her feel safe, grounded, loved. So why did she feel this creeping sense of unease? The dreams hadn't helped. Dark water, the whisper of her name, cold hands pulling her down. She shook off the lingering chill and turned her attention to the package on her bed, the wedding dress. It had arrived earlier than expected, a surprise delivery from the boutique. Tugging open the box, she peeled back layers of crisp tissue paper, then froze. Unforeseen event, the wedding dress horror. The dress wasn't the ivory perfection she had chosen. Instead, it was stained, subtle at first glance, but unmistakable. Dark streaks of water marred the lace, spreading across the bodice like ghostly fingers. The edges of the fabric were speckled with dirt, as if it had been dragged through wet earth. Her breath hitched as she lifted the dress, her fingers grazing something inside the lining. The stitching was slightly undone, and when she parted the delicate threads, a lock of hair tumbled out, dark, brittle, damp. A shudder ran through her. The hair felt wrong, like it belonged to someone long buried. Her pulse pounded. Who would do this? Was this some sort of sick prank? With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and called Adrian. He picked up on the second ring. "Eve? What's wrong?" His voice was steady, calm, so reassuringly normal. "My dress," she whispered. "Something's wrong with it." She barely remembered throwing on a coat and rushing out the door, dress bundled in her arms. By the time she reached Adrian's house, she was shaking. Adrian met her at the door, his expression immediately shifting to concern. "Evelyn, you're freezing." He wrapped an arm around her, guiding her inside. "Look," she said, unraveling the dress, half expecting him to dismiss her fears. But when she looked down, it was perfect. The lace was pristine, the ivory fabric untouched. No water stains, no dirt, no hair. She felt the blood drain from her face. No, it was right here. There was hair sewn into it and the stains. Adrian's hands found her shoulders. "Eve." His tone was soothing, but there was something off about it. "You've been stressed. Maybe it was just a trick of the light." She stared at him. He believed she imagined it. Or worse, he wanted her to believe that. Shocking discovery, a second woman. Later that night, she relayed everything to Claire, her best friend and voice of reason. Claire didn't laugh. She didn't tell Evelyn she was overreacting. Instead, she looked worried. "I need to tell you something," Claire said, lowering her voice. "I've been looking into Adrian's past." A chill crept up Evelyn's spine. Claire hesitated, then pulled up an old newspaper article on her phone. It wasn't about Lillian. It was about another woman, Julia Reynolds, a bridesmaid from Lillian's wedding. Missing. Never found. Evelyn's breath came sharp. "What are you saying?" Claire hesitated. "I think this has happened before." Evelyn stared at the article, the edges of her vision blurring. How well did she really know Adrian? And was she already too far in to escape? Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the article Claire had sent her. Julia Reynolds, a bridesmaid in Lillian's wedding. Missing. No evidence, no body, just vanished. Her chest tightened. One missing fiancé was tragic. Two missing women was something else entirely. She wanted to ask Adrian. She wanted to confront him. But the memory of the wedding dress incident stopped her. The way he had looked at her. The way his hands had settled too gently on her shoulders, like he was holding something back. Instead, she reached for her phone. The private investigator she had hired, Daniel Whitmore, had been looking into Lillian's death and Adrian's past. Maybe he had something new. She dialed his number. No answer. Her stomach knotted. She tried again. Still nothing. Then, her phone vibrated. A text. Come to your apartment. I found something. Urgent. Evelyn's hands shook as she unlocked the door to her apartment. The lights were off, but something felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel? She called, stepping inside. Silence. Then a sound, a slow drip. Her stomach clenched. The sound led her to the bathroom, where steam curled against the mirror, fogging it completely. The bathtub was full, water lapping gently at the porcelain edge. Her foot hit something wet on the floor, and then she saw it. Daniel's body was face down in the tub, his arms dangling over the side, fingers slack and lifeless. His skin had turned a sickly blue-gray hue. Evelyn let out a strangled scream, stumbling backward. Her breath came in ragged gasps as her gaze lifted to the mirror. The steam had begun to clear, and there, scrawled in dripping, watery letters, was a message. He's next. A single thought slammed into her mind. Was Adrian being haunted too? Or was someone framing him? She fumbled for her phone, hands slick with sweat, and dialed 911. After the police left, after hours of questions and reports, Evelyn sat curled up on the couch, gripping a cup of untouched tea. Her apartment no longer felt like hers. Felt like something was watching. The cops had ruled it a possible homicide. But who? And why? Her thoughts spiraled until her phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. Her breath caught. She hesitated, then answered. Static hissed through the speaker. Then a whisper. Soft. Familiar. You're me now. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Who is this? She whispered. The line went dead. Her fingers trembled as she opened her call log. She stared at the number. Then her breath stopped. The number wasn't unknown. It was Lillian's old phone number. A phone number that shouldn't exist anymore. She quickly traced the call, following her phone's settings. The signal had bounced between towers until it looped back to a final location. Evelyn's own phone. Her hands went numb. Was someone playing with her? Or was she truly losing her mind? A quiet knock sounded at her door, making her jump. Adrian. She hesitated before opening it. He stepped inside, his face unreadable. I heard what happened. His voice was smooth, careful. Are you okay? Evelyn looked into his eyes, searching. For guilt, for lies, for something. But she saw nothing, and that terrified her more than anything else. Evelyn's wrists ached from the rope binding them to the wooden chair. The scent of wilted roses and dust filled the small, dimly lit cabin. Candlelight flickered against the rough-hewn walls, casting long, grotesque shadows. She had woken up here, dressed in the same wedding gown she had chosen months ago. Only now it felt wrong. Wrong because she hadn't put it on herself. Across from her, Adrian stood before a makeshift altar, straightening the cuffs of his jet-black suit. His expression was eerily calm, his movements deliberate. She swallowed hard. Adrian, please. You should be happy, he interrupted smoothly. You get to be my bride. The words sent a deep, nauseating dread through her. She shook her head, fighting to stay composed. Adrian, this isn't you. His eyes snapped to hers, dark and unreadable. Isn't it? He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing hers. I wanted Lillian, he said, voice almost tender. She was supposed to be my wife, but she betrayed me. Evelyn's breath hitched. Adrian sighed, almost wistful. And then there was Julia, and Catherine before her. So many of them, so many mistakes. His expression hardened. But you, Evelyn, you were supposed to be different. You were supposed to love me the way they couldn't. He crouched beside her, fingers brushing a stray curl from her face. You should have just loved me, Evelyn. His voice darkened. It would have been easier. A cold shiver crawled down her spine. How many women had he done this to? Adrian turned away, reaching for something on the altar, a veil. Evelyn's mind raced. This is my only chance. As he moved, she rocked her chair violently, tipping herself onto the floor. The impact jolted through her, but she ignored the pain, scrambling to loosen her bindings. Adrian sighed. Must you make this difficult? She yanked harder at the ropes, almost free. Then the candles flickered wildly, their flames bending unnaturally. The cabin grew cold. A gust of air blew through the room, whispering through the decayed lace of Evelyn's dress. But it wasn't just air. It was a voice. Adrian. Adrian went rigid. The whisper came again. Familiar, broken, and dripping with something ancient. Adrian, love. The wooden floorboards groaned as if someone invisible was stepping closer. Evelyn's heart pounded. And then a shadow moved. Not just any shadow. A woman's. And suddenly she was there. Lillian. Her form was wrong, flickering between the beautiful woman Evelyn had seen in pictures and something rotting, ruined, waterlogged. Her fingers curled at her sides, blackened nails digging into her own decomposed skin. Adrian turned to face her, his face pale, horrified. No, he whispered. Lillian reached for him, her hands pressing against his throat. He gasped not at Evelyn but at Lillian. He saw her. Adrian stumbled back, choking, clawing at his own skin. His body convulsed as if unseen hands were squeezing the air from his lungs. Evelyn didn't wait. She grabbed a broken shard of glass from the floor and drove it into his chest. Adrian let out a strangled gasp, his dark eyes wide in shock. Blood bloomed against his crisp white shirt. Then he collapsed. Lillian's form began to fade, her expression unreadable. And then she was gone. Evelyn stumbled out of the cabin, breath hitching, hands stained red. The world outside felt too bright, too unreal. The police arrived hours later, after Evelyn had somehow managed to flag down a passing car. They searched the cabin. They found the candles, the altar, the ropes, but no body. Only Adrian's blood-stained wedding suit, neatly folded on the altar. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. No tracks, no sign of where he had gone. Evelyn sat in the back of the police car, numb. Had she imagined it all? Had she really killed him? Or was he never truly gone? 1 month later, the nightmares never stopped. The feeling of being watched never faded. Evelyn had left town trying to erase the past, trying to start over, until the letter arrived. A white envelope, elegant calligraphy. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single card, embossed in gold, a wedding invitation. Her hands shook as she read the name at the bottom. Adrian Blackwood. Final line, save the date.